All right. Happy Monday. Happy Veterans Day. Everybody tuning in today. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm News 6 meteorologist David Nazario, back from a very fast-paced weekend and a rather interesting one. We're once again deep diving into the Caribbean Sea, talking the tropics. And if you met with us last week, at the end of last week, Thursday, Friday, give or take, we had alluded to the potential of another area of interest down in the Caribbean. That has since come to fruition. National Hurricane Center has highlighted a new area of interest down there in a very familiar spot to where we saw the likes of Helene, Milton, and a few other of our named stores wander through over the last several months. It's been very active and volatile down there in the Caribbean, and now we have another threat potentially looming on the horizon, already up to a 40% chance that this will take on named storm status as we go over the next 7 days. So with that being said, let's hop on over. This is a look at our tropical satellite imagery. And the reason I have this pulled up is for us to kind of set the stage. I really enjoy doing that from a large scale perspective. And now where we're looking particularly is going to be right there near Hispaniola, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and everywhere in between in terms of the Caribbean Sea. By the way, almost forgot my manners. Good morning to everyone joining us over on Just Weather. Carmen Poole, great to see you again. Jerry, Mick and Marley, Susan Todd, Yahir, thanks for tuning in with us. Axel over on the News 6 YouTube channel, and Kevin Hawthorne, good morning from Lakeland, Florida, and a wonderful morning to all of you on News 6 Plus who can't exactly join in on the live chat, but just know you are welcomed and always a pleasure to have as an audience. So the reason I bring this up, and I'm actually going to show you a third-party website, Climate Prediction Center, at the tail end of this discussion to really give you an understanding of what the large-scale weather picture looks like, because that's important here. This isn't exactly anomalous. This isn't exactly rare, but it is uncommon. And I know that may sound kind of like apples to oranges. Rare being we never really ever see this. Uncommon meaning there's always that potential, but it doesn't happen frequently like we would see in the months of September or October, a system trying to spur up down there in the Caribbean Sea. So you can see there's lots of moisture in the Pacific, the Caribbean, and even out over the main development region of the Atlantic, where the water vapor satellite, all those shades of blues really paint the picture perfectly. And that's pivotal. That's actually a response to the MJO still rocking through our region, our neck of the world. And that's what's helping to conjure up these favorable conditions for the potential of tropical development. So now let's move on. This is our National Hurricane Center outlook, and I'm going to zoom us in so we can really get a grasp of what we're looking at here. Last time we met, and there's my red circle from the last time we met, I left that on there just as kind of like a sanity check. If you didn't tune in with us, I had mentioned on Wednesday, Thursday, and our Friday live streams that where that red circle is drawn, I'm going to be watching closely alongside the rest of the News 6 Pinpoint Weather team for the potential of another area of interest to spark up. And as you can see now, National Hurricane Center already has us in code orange as opposed to just the infamous yellow blip that we're all very familiar with. They're not giving it any confidence that there will be any development going on over the next 2 days. Not likely to see a named storm, let alone a tropical low pressure forming by tomorrow or Wednesday. However, 7 days, 40%, meaning they're 40% of the way there to developing a named storm by this time next week. I would personally argue this is going to continue to go up. We will likely see it reach 50% later today based on our afternoon guidance that's already coming in. And then by Thursday, we might have an invest down there or an area for us to really start to dig into, and for our global computer models and our higher res models to start to finally fixate on and give us a bit more of a representation of what the end solution will look like. Let's take us into the tropical probabilities. I'm going to take a quick glance over at the chats here, make sure I'm not missing any important questions just yet. Zachary Lee over on News 6, how long will this incoming cold front last? So I'll get to that question towards the back end of the brief because, believe it or not, the cold front is not only going to influence Florida's weather, but it'll influence this puppy that we're talking about here. So as you can see, our tropical probabilities have really gone up since last week. When we last spoke about this, we were sitting maybe at around a 30 to 50% shot at seeing an area of low pressure form up down there in the Caribbean. If I take you through time, look at how quickly we blossom into the above 80% threshold. It was a couple of frames ago, and I'll actually stop the loop so I can show you more in depth. Let me go forward in time to right about there. Let's see, right there. And if I go ahead and take my little handy dandy query tool and populate that, look at that. European ensembles are keeping their probabilities nearly at 100%. You round up, and we are at a 90% threshold now that a tropical depression at the minimum will be forming down there. We have tropical storm probabilities and we have hurricane probabilities, but let's get something on the table first before we start to really delve into intensity, development rate, how fast it'll intensify, if it'll organize quick or if it'll be more of a broad, sloppy mess at first. But just know that our probabilities have once again done that famous incremental step up. Last night, the European model, if you have access to some of the models, was actually very bullish. We don't really see it that bullish, and what that tells me as a meteorologist is hold on to your butts because we're just about locked in. Something is on its way. So now we saw this as well. We're very familiar with our upper level pattern. We are seeing it completely go upside down. We actually have an article now on clickorlando.com discussing why it is that this new feature may actually influence our weather, if not more than simply influence over the next 7 days. If you recall, last week, it was very warm out, very muggy, very humid. It still is to an extent, but we've seen that drop just a little bit, and our rain chances have come down. That was partially in response to Raphael being in close proximity to the state, but on top of that, we had a big old ridge over the southeast United States. And if you take a look now, I'll have to adjust the timestamp here. Let me get in here and manually drag it over. If you look now, we have the trough coming in over the eastern United States. You see all those purple and pinkish shades up there over Montreal, Quebec, Ontario, the Great Lakes. That's going to be the extension high up in the atmosphere as to where our dry and cooler air is going to start to come down towards the end of this week and influence our weather, bring our humidity down, and dry things out, make it a little more normal for this time of year in November. And then you go a little bit further than that and look at that behemoth of a trough that's going to be racing over the United States and extending down through the Mississippi and Ohio valleys, over the Appalachians. That's really what's going to help drive our temps down over the next few days. And what that might do with that tropical disturbance in the Caribbean is give it a little nudge to the east. Our first fail mode is it could run into Central America. Based on the current pattern in the large scale, this trough might actually help to magnetize it a little bit and pull it off of that land interaction and actually allow it to develop. So what worked for us, for Raphael, could quite possibly be working against us as we go over the next 7 days with this new feature. So now, let's get into the GFS spin and wind before we get ready to take our first break and open up some time for Q&A, because I would imagine you all have questions today, and I'm very happy and excited to answer them to the best of my ability. First and foremost, this is going to be the latest GFS. This is the 6Z. The 12Z is currently populating, and for those of you who may not be familiar, when we say Zulu or 6, 12, 18, it's just the universal time with which our computer models will update. So for example, 12Z for this time of the year correlates to 7 a.m. for our Floridian localized time. The reason they use Zulu across the planet is so that way you don't have to convert all across wherever it is you are waiting for your model data. And if you watch this, there's our area of interest already starting to show itself as we get into Wednesday, those pockets of orange, yellow, and red down there in the Caribbean. Remember, we talked, and I had mentioned to you all last week that as this moves through the Caribbean, it'll get kind of sucked in down there in the southern Caribbean. A giant whirlpool is going to pull that vorticity in, and as you can see, it starts to spin up very, very dangerously close to Nicaragua and Honduras down there. But it does manage to consolidate. You can see how that trough first, I'll rewind it, see how that trough that I'd mentioned previously kind of gravitates it and pulls it back towards the east ever so slightly over open water, and then eventually, just going to go through the loop here, it pulls north, and there it goes into the Gulf of Mexico with the incoming next front. And I'll zoom us out. You can see it right there. See that long band from Minneapolis all the way down to the Texas-New Mexico border? That's our next front. That's what's helping to pull it north. Now, this is subject to change. This can still change. And we're going to talk about a couple of the different fail modes here momentarily. We're going to be butting up against our first break here momentarily. So in summary for now, confidence is there, something will develop. And I'm going to have a graphic that gives you some key takeaways to keep in your back pocket, at least over the next 3 to 5 days, while we work feverishly here in the News 6 Pinpoint Weather Department to dial in exactly what's expected to happen as we go from today, Veterans Day, to this upcoming Friday, when we may have a more organized feature on the game board down there in the Caribbean. But with that being said, before we go on a break, I just want to wish all of our veterans out there, both prior service and who may still be putting the uniform on a regular basis, a happy Veterans Day. We are thinking of you as a fellow veteran myself and a current service member. It's a pleasure to say that to everybody out there. I hope you enjoy the day and the festivities wherever it is you may be tuning in from, and we'll see you again soon. Stay with us. We'll be right back here momentarily. And welcome back. We are so back. We're back for the B block of our segment, and we're going to talk model consistency before we do our key takeaways, and then we wrap up with a hopefully gratuitous Q&A session, because I do see there are a lot more questions popping off in the chat today, and I want to make sure that I address them to the best of my ability. So first and foremost, what we're looking at here is our latest GFS. This is the wind velocity and wind strength down there across the Caribbean and our entire viewing area if you are a neighbor of ours down there in the Caribbean Sea or even in Central America. I wanted to bring this up, and unfortunately, I don't have side-to-side capabilities. I still need to figure out how to do that. Maybe a question offline for another one of our wonderful meteorologists. But what I really want to show you here is how close our models are in terms of mirroring one another, that consistency. It's crucial that for us forecasters, we see the models lining up. If there's one doing this and one doing that, then for us, it keeps our confidence fairly low in what the true end result could look like. And in this case, it's kind of bad news. I'm going to shoot straight with you, but it's good to know that we can rely on our models. They're singing the same tune more or less. So as you go through time, this is into Wednesday. You can see the American model has our area of low pressure developing. And then as I'd mentioned, by Thursday, we should have an area of investigation. This would be Invest 99L down there in the Caribbean for reconnaissance aircraft and our higher res hurricane models to hone in on. After Thursday, we start to see the strengthening trend just off the immediate coast of Nicaragua and Honduras. Now, if you look up to the north here, I'll go ahead and draw it out with my telestrator. I always do that every time. I apologize for that. Let me go back in time and go forward, if you look up to the north, I'll draw it in for you. See this corridor of stronger winds off to the northeast? That is that first trough that's going to come through and help to alleviate some of our humidity and give us a comfortable weekend this weekend here in Central Florida. That's what's going to take this little bubble of low pressure and move it just barely off the coast of Central America. What that does is it gives it the opportunity to finish developing, and as a result, you see in the models the winds increase, the area consolidates or tightens up before it starts to move towards the north. Now let's move on to the European model, the King Euro model, as a lot of folks will mention. And if you look in the same general area, the overlay may look a little different. That's just because we've swapped different models. And as a result, I'll take you right through time. Wednesday, same general thinking. Thursday, there's our weaker area of low pressure. But then watch this. The front comes down, magnetizes it just to the east, and gives it the opportunity to start to spin up into what looks a lot more reminiscent of a tropical cyclone, and then it begins to move towards the north. So, with that being said, I want to get right into this before we run through any more of our time. Key takeaways for our area of interest. So right from the jump start, all the global models suggest tropical low pressure formation. That's kind of a given at this point. Even some of our lesser models that you don't typically see communicated with you all on the big screen or over on the broadcast side of it, like the Korean model, the Chinese model, the UK model, etc., they're all still thinking Thursday and Friday is when it could be game time and we might see another named storm on the board down there. Number two, general thinking is a quick bump to the east in response to that first front and trough coming down, but then it'll start to be dragged more towards the north. Don't really see any indications it'll go back west or further east. We'll have to keep an eye on that because our models are still dialing in the steering currents, but right now, especially historically speaking, in the month of November, whenever something marinates down there, it is more than likely to move north. The last one, capital letters, fail modes. What that means is this feature could become so wrapped up in Central America, it never gets going. Could just have too much land interaction, too much of an issue wandering back over open water that it just dies. Or perhaps it stays broad and elongated and it doesn't feel the trough trying to pull it back out over open water, and it might lift north, but it won't be anything worthwhile to anybody outside of a huge rainmaker. Still a bit of a detriment to the weather, but obviously, much better than what some of our hurricane solutions are indicating. I leave you with three periods because inevitably, even though it is November 11th, even though we're ready to rock and roll into the Thanksgiving holiday, Black Friday, and then Christmas, we still need to keep on our toes and we need to watch this closely because before you know it, we may be delving back into preparation for another tropical system. Not guaranteed, not something to worry or stress over right now. We've got your back here at News 6, but just keep checking back with us periodically, please, especially as we do our daily tropical updates for all the latest information. And with that being said, we've got about 5.5 minutes left in the show. Let's open it up to some questions. Starting off over on News 6, we have Zachary Lee. I'm going to address your question. How long will this cold front last? So for the first one, it's not going to be around for too long. We'll see our temperatures come down to about normal starting around Friday, rolling through the weekend. And then before you know it, on Monday, Tuesday, we'll start to see a little bit of that humidity sneaking back into our area, which as a result will not necessarily increase the actual temperature, but the humidity will go back up and the heat index, so what it actually feels like outside, will also bounce back a little bit. Zachary Lee as well over on News 6 also asks, what are the current water temps in the area? So the water temps in the Gulf of Mexico are still fairly ripe. We're still sitting at about 84 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, and you only need about 80 degrees minimum to develop tropical cyclones. So more than enough energy up there. You still have the loop current, and then down in the Caribbean, plenty of subsurface energy for these features to feed off of. Jermaine over on News 6 as well. Fantastic questions. Should Jamaica pay attention to this? Absolutely. I always encourage that wherever it is you are, whenever we have a potential tropical storm in the Caribbean, everybody needs to have eyes on. Because no matter if it goes north, south, east, west, somebody is likely to receive it. So we all need to kind of keep our head on a swivel and maintain our situational awareness. Let's see. Thank you all for the wonderful comments over on Just Weather for the Veterans Day holiday. I do appreciate it. Jerry Coate over on Just Weather. What has made that portion of the Caribbean so potent this season? It's the fact we flipped from a strong El Nino to a weak, moderate La Nina. That's actually an excellent question because it goes to show the night and day difference between last hurricane season, where we saw some AOIs, we saw some of those yellow blips. We had the PTC last year in November that didn't do anything because El Nino shredded it. It cheese grated it. Another reason why, and I'm going to pull this up now before I forget to answer your question, is if you look, this might be a very bizarre looking graphic. But the key takeaway here is these are the different phases of the MJO, and it might be difficult to spot. But if you look towards the bottom left of this, we'll call it like a compass rose almost, kind of towards the southwest corner of it. What that is showing is the MJO is still in phases 1 and 2 of its cycle through the equator. And as a result, we're actually still in the very favorable quadrant for it to stir up potential tropical trouble for the Atlantic Basin. Blah, blah, blah over on Just Weather. How will Sarasota be impacted? For those of you who may be wondering about your location, we're not going to talk about that just yet because we don't even have a feature on the board. We're only at a 40% out of 100 that something will develop. Once it starts to develop, or if we get at least a little bit closer to 100% confidence, we can then start to dial in where this system might go and how maybe it might impact your local area. But I want to stay away from that for now. Over on News 6, Zachary Lee, do you think the hurricane season window, June to November, could change in the next 10 years? It's very possible, but at the same time, as I was mentioning during the first half of the live stream, this is not rare. This is not a weird occurrence we never see. If you go back even just 2 years, 2022, we had Hurricane Nicole make landfall in Florida during the month of November. Is it a frequent occurrence? Absolutely not. But is it something that has us all like, whoa, we've never seen this before? No, not at all. This is just unfortunately one of those situations where the hurricane season does not want to go out with a sigh and a whimper. Jermaine over on News 6, you're very welcome for sure. Let's see. Melissa Riley, hey David, how are you? Is there another hurricane out there over on Just Weather? So as of right now, no, there's no hurricane, nothing out there, but we are watching an area of interest. So that's going to be everything that we fixate on over the next 5 to 7 days to make sure that nothing does come out of there. Although confidence is rising, we will likely see another named storm as we go through the next week. Jim Dog over on Just Weather. I will say this, because I do see that a lot. It's too far to know where it'll go. Well, I don't want to play devil's advocate, but you know after a while, through pattern recognition, through climatology, when you look at the large-scale weather pattern and you understand what to look for, there are ways of calculating a projected path this far in advance, especially this time of year when you have a pretty rhythmic pattern of troughs coming off the U.S., things getting pulled north and ridging further out into the Atlantic. You kind of know, but we're still dialing that in for now. With that being said, if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, drop them in the comments section down below upon the conclusion of these live streams. Thank you all so much for being such a wonderful audience today. I hope you have a phenomenal rest of your Veterans Day, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. We're going to go ahead and cut the show. It is time, but we will be back very soon for more information. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you again soon. Have a great rest of your Monday.